Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Somerset Library's oral history session. Today, I'm Harold Rivard. This is Lowell Rivard. We're not related. He's from the Hibbing branch. We're more related to his wife, and Eloris Rivard.
And I'm a sister-in-law, too.
His sister-in-law.
Yeah.
And today we're going to talk, and Eloris, on different subjects, different things of early Somerset in their life. And Eloris is a lifetime resident of Somerset. Her parents, Lawrence and Marie, farm north of Somerset, Highway 35. And Lowell is a lifelong resident of Somerset, and he had a hand in many businesses over the years. And his folks came from up on the Iron Range, where most of, I don't know where they came from before that, Canada?
They must.
So, whenever they ask me, I just say we're distant cousins. So let's start with Eloris and some of the early thoughts that you have.
My grandfather was Oliver Klucher. He came from Canada in 1838. He lived to be 87 years old, and I think that's pretty good in those days. He was a farmer near Star Prairie, Wisconsin, and he married Emma Rivard. Now, I don't know how that's related to Lowell or to Harold, but anyway, he married a Rivard. And she had also come from Canada. They had 10 children, of which my grandmother, Oria, was born. And she married my grandfather, a Mabel Martell. And from that marriage, my mother was born. And as Harold said, they lived on a farm north of Somerset on 35, not too far from the Drosiers and the Metterjanes and the Treasures and all that group of people. And the Lawyers lived right across the road from us. They had a 120-acre farm. And when my grandfather retired and my dad and mother married, my dad took over the farm. And my grandpa lived with us, and he lived to be 86 years old. I was also born on that same farm. So, and the house is still there. The barn was tore down after they had a tornado. There wasn't much left. And the outbuildings are now gone. But the house is still pretty much the same. It's been remodeled. They've done a lot on the outside, but that's still the original house that my grandfather had built. Let's see, what else have I got here? My grandmother had a stroke, and my mother kept telling me that she died when Mom was 11 years old. So my mother never remembered having a real mother that could, do things with her. She had a stroke where she couldn't talk, she couldn't move, and my grandfather would come in from the field or the barn, and Mom and him would turn her over several times a day. They had to feed her, and of course she was incontinent, so that all had to be taken care of. It's a lot different than they do now when they have nursing homes. I remember when I was just a little kid that it was Depression time, and of course there wasn't much in the fields for the cattle, so we moved them to my uncle who lived on the Apple River, so there was grass around that area, and so the cattle at least had something to eat. And they would go there morning and night to feed the cattle, to milk the cows. And since I was 8 to 10 years older than my brother and sister, they were not born yet, so they had to take me along. Well, I was not to go up into the hay barn. I never could understand why, but that's all you got to do is tell a kid, don't go up in the hay barn. I went up the hay barn and I thought, oh, I know that gentleman. I believe that's Harry Delt. I looked around and I didn't realize it was a still, but that's what it was. So I had an education without knowing it.
And you thought it was nice that Harry came to visit all the time.
I thought so, yeah. Harry and Grace were at our house an awful lot. I went to Lakeside School, not too far from where Charles and Mary Ann Fraser live. It was a one-room schoolhouse. We took the water in, we took it out, we had to heat. There was a stove to keep the school heated. I went there for my first and second grade. I had Anna Olson Kickoffer for my first grade teacher, and I had Agnes Cook, I think she was Aggie Parnell probably at that time, for my second grade teacher. Then the neighbors, Lawyers, and my mother and dad decided, well, I think we'll send the kids to St. Anne's. There was no school bus at that time, So they took turns taking us to school. I started in the 3rd grade, and that's graduated from St. Anne's, on to high school in Somerset. Let's see, what else do I have here? Oh, at the Lakeside School, we had PTA meetings, and we had basket socials. Maybe Laura remembers those. They were kind of fun. We had fixed up these little baskets, and we were hoping that the basket was pretty enough to entice some nice young gentleman to come and eat with us. However, Sand Hill School, which was down the road a little bit, was more up class apparently. They had dances. I think Teresa went to that one, didn't you, Teresa? So when I got a little older, I got to go to the dances. That was a lot more fun than hoping somebody would get my basket. We carried our lunches to the country school, and I had a syrup pill for my lunch bucket. We ate a lot of syrup at our house in those days. Did you, Lowell?
Oh, yeah.
She did too. Yeah. I don't remember what was in it, but I remember the syrup pill anyway.
2 quart pails and gallon pails.
I suppose you had the gallon. You ate more than I did. My uncle lived with us. He had never gotten married. His name was Lowell Rivard, and he went to a CC camp. I think that's what they called him in those days. And Mother was always glad to see him come back, except that he came back and he had bed bugs. Oh. And when you had to wash clothes in those days, it was a chore. You had to haul the water first, heat the water. We had what they call a washroom in an old shed, and you had to heat that water on the stove. And Mother wasn't real happy about having to wash everything at sight. But that's the way things were, and I guess everybody was in the same boat, so you never thought you were too bad off. My mother worked at the K rations just a very short time, but I remember coming home from school and she wasn't there, and I thought, oh, what an empty feeling. Now everybody works, so all the kids come home to an empty house. I remember my dad hauling milk down to the Sand Hill Cheese Factory. Got to go along a couple times, and then the men would stand out there and they'd gab, and I think, oh, why don't can't we go home? I mean, gee, this isn't any more fun. They had milk cans then, and then later on, when the milking machines came around, they had this bulk tank, I guess they called it. Yeah. So that was a little bit different.
Well, when you were farming, what did they do with your milk?
When he first started, when Dad
Microphone.
first started to farm,
Microphone.
he was,
Sorry about that. I'm holding the microphone.
when
He's
he
trying to
first
talk.
started farming, he had separate the milk, get the cream, and brought it down here to Somerset to make butter.
And that was where the old,
Where Benner had their sawmill, that used to be a creamery, and we used to carry it, haul it down there. Dad had a Model T Ford he used to use to bring it down there. And then Paquin's had a little store right across from the bank where the town hall used to be. I used to stop there and get 2 cents for jelly beans. That was great.
That was probably a lot of jelly beans in those days, huh?
Yeah, you get a nice little bag too.
Yeah. I milked cows when I was a kid, morning and night, before I went to school and I got home. And then as I got older, I was probably a freshman at that time, still had to milk the cows. And I could remember having dates. A lot of times they still caught me in the barn. But you know what? They came back, so I guess it wasn't too bad. We had no electricity. The windmill pumped the water for the cattle and for the house. I remember going to to Lowell's place. Doug had an accident when he was just before he started freshman year in school, and his mother had a birthday party for him, so all of us kids were invited. And I got to that house and I thought, boy, this is a farmhouse and they actually have electricity and running water. This is great. See, you were richer than I was.
We had more guts.
That's what it was. We had outdoor plumbing, and catalogs were the thing. I think you know what they were used for. Then when it was peach season, Use the peach wrappers. Well, that was great. I slept upstairs, and all we had for heat up there was that chimney going through the main part of the house. You didn't waste any time when you got up in the morning. You took your clothes and headed downstairs to next to the stove to get dressed. We had large gardens. We had a cellar just underneath the kitchen part, and that's where we kept a lot of our vegetables. And then I think Lowell can elaborate on the grain bins. You want to tell them what we used to put in our grain bins?
Oh, I could try. Well, every fall we used to butcher 3-4 steers and 4 or 5 pigs, and we'd bring it in, process it ourselves, and we'd can a lot of it, and then we'd freeze the balances and wrap it in paper as best we could, because we didn't have any wrapping paper like we have in the stores now. And we put it in a seamless sack.
Oh my God!
Very close.
I don't remember.
What he was saying, they had a seamless stack, and then they put it in the grain bin or the wheat bins and bury it, and then it would be June or July before it would still be froze. I never heard of that before. And then we were talking about salt pork and side pork.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, crocks of salt pork and side pork in the basement all the time.
All the time. Yeah. And you
In
know,
the smokehouse had hams and bacon.
And then later on, you improved the ice.
yeah. Then wasn't it Helmer Olson that had? Yeah. Well, that's not too far from where you lived, Alice, right? Yeah. And so then they would that ice was kept in sawdust.
Covered with sawdust, a lot of sawdust.
And then they bring it out to the different places. You had a little ice box in your house, and that was upgraded a lot in those days. I remember going to a few movies. I think, I keep saying it was on the Vanasse gas station building that they had showed these movies. You don't remember that?
It's against the school.
I know they say the school. Okay, well, whatever, anyways. Yeah, I remember going to that, but then I also remembered when Theodore Belil had his milk truck, and he'd come and pick us kids up. Johnny was in my class, and then they'd take us to the show and house in New Richmond. All the kids in the back of the little stool sitting in the back of that milk truck. We'd get back after, and then Anna Belil would have homemade ice cream for us, or hot chocolate, or whatever. That was really great too. Then I remember going to Gone to the Wind, and that was a big treat. But you had to have your parents' permission. Well, my mom and dad didn't go, but I went along with Louie and Sarah Lalier, the next door neighbors. And of course, I was their daughter for the afternoon, so I got to go into the movie. And you know, I can't remember anything bad about that movie. I don't know why they censored it so much at that time. The only bad thing I remember was when, was it Clark Gable, I guess, was, frankly, Charlotte, I don't give a damn, he said. That, I thought, boy, is that changed nowadays. You can't go to a movie that they don't say anything derogative. My first 4-H project, I made a dress. I'm not a seamstress, I'll tell you that. My grandmother, both grandmothers were, but not me. Anyway, I made my first dress out of flour sacks. You remember flour sacks, you guys?
Yes, they used to have flowered material.
Yeah, that was really great. Yeah, I remember eating a lot of oatmeal as a child too. And in those oatmeal boxes, they were not round like they are now, they were square. And they had, you get a dish or a cup or a saucer, a plate.
Yeah, I remember those dishes.
Yeah, well, we had a set of dishes at our house. We ate a lot of oatmeal. Our skis and our skates were anything to write home about. Did a lot of jump roping, and boys used to play marbles. We did a lot. We had played jacks, and as you can see, my hands aren't very big, so I did well for the first maybe up to 6 or 7, but after that, I couldn't catch them very well. But it was fun anyway.
We were talking about flour sacks.
Yeah.
What'd you do with them? Sugar sacks?
Bleach them. Some of them were material too, so that we could make things with them. Aprons.
Mostly it was feed sacks that were colored.
Yeah,
chicken feed. And,
yeah, we had chickens
and
when,
the color-
I remember picking the eggs too. The old hens picking at you. We had a 40-acre parcel of land that had a lot of woods on it, and we had to go blackberry picking. And that was an all-day job. You get dressed with long sleeves, long pants. And you know, with blackberry season, it's a warm time of the year. But in order to keep the mosquitoes away from you, you had to dress like that. We'd even pack a lunch, and Mom used to kind of make it sound like it was going to be much fun to have a picnic. But it got old after a while. And then you'd eat blackberry sauce, blackberry pie, blackberry jelly, and we'd have blackberries with cream. My dad had a pickup truck, and he used to take his, I think down here maybe, wasn't there a Poyer that had a female or something?
Yeah.
Well, apparently.
In the corner where just right here.
Treadmill.
Yeah, okay, well, anyway, I get to go to the feed mill with him, and then you get a little treat. But he'd take that truck sometimes other places too, and I thought, why didn't he take the car? I don't like riding in this truck. It wasn't cool. Now everybody's got a pickup. The kids think it's great. Well, after I graduated from high school, I went to nursing school, and then I married Doug, Lowell's brother. And we bought the parcel of land, 120 acres, up here where the industrial park is now. I worked at the clinic, Stillwater, for 26 years. Now the Stillwater Clinic is on our property. And so is Harold's. Christmas was solely just immediate family. We never had anybody else come over for Christmas, but New Year's was a different story. Apparently, since maybe all the French people did that, I don't know. But we had the home place. Grandpa was still living. So all the cousins, aunts, uncles, everybody came over on New Year's. There wasn't any exchange of presents or anything like that, but they all brought a dish to pass. But my mother made meat pies. And those meat pies were made ahead of time, and it was cold extremely cold in one of the bedrooms upstairs, and that's where the meat pies were kept before before New Year's came. And that's about all I have to say. Lowell will tell you all about the moonshine days, I guess.
I didn't know Lowell was so gun shy.
I'm just talking to one person isn't so bad with you.
What'd you just ask?
We talked yesterday with Lowell about his early days, and in Somerset there evidently was 3 large distilleries. Herbie Dickoss, Ed Fagnant, and Lowell's dad. And by large, I know of some that said 20 gallons, but how many gallons?
20 barrel stills. Dad had 200 barrel stills.
Output of how much a day?
Put on 100, 150 gallons a day.
And that, how much a gallon?
When we first started, it was $5.
$5 a gallon,
$5
so
a gallon for it.
that's a lot of money that
That was
period of
before
time.
the Prohibition, and after Prohibition, it changed,
Microphone,
you know.
Harold.
At last, they were selling it for $1 a gallon,
In about 32, 33.
33, 34,
You know, I have,
35.
I can't hear Lowell. She's saying they can't.
oh, okay. The sugar, the high school kids had interviewed and Allie Parnell, and he talked about bringing railroad cars into town. And they would just be money in the back, and people would take the sugar, and he never knew. And some people hauled it back with trucks, and I think that's what you said your dad came back.
My dad used to go down on 14th Street. There was a place there called Oglansky's. There was damaged freight. We used to buy a lot of sugar from them. And that seemed to work out real good. It was unprocessed sugar, raw sugar. It was brown and white and brown and lumpy. But it was good for making moonshine.
Did you ever make moonshine on that farm of yours?
Never stored it there, except for that 1,000 gallons or so that Dad threw in a snowbank, and the month of March it started showing up. We had to hurry out there and shovel more snow.
How do you ever get contacts to get rid of that much
Well, he had the Oglanskys, and there was a syndicate in Minneapolis.
He talked about, okay. There was a syndicate, and he talked about his dad bought a car every 3 to 6 months, and that
My Uncle Bert was new car manager for Barry Chevrolet.
it always had to be a
Ford?
No, Chevrolets, all Chevrolets, and he'd trade cars every 3 months.
So then, was that so they could disguise the cars?
And then he was talking about how the village really helped out identifying who came to town and was looking for what. You might wanna,
Yeah, Bill Shea was postmaster, and he had to give the federal agents the address. So as soon as they got that over with, he'd run up to Father Bodette and the nuns, and they'd come out and tell us or call us and tell us that the federal agents were in town.
That's what you call help?
and nuns even liked the clear moonshine.
I sent a bottle home with the nuns. Bring a bottle up to Father.
He said also that in one night they could move the still, everything, the still, the barrels, the mash could be gone in one night. One night. You remember moving them?
We had to have dairy barns, big dairy barns to put 200 barrels in, you know. And running water. That was a big thing. And they'd take a 50-gallon wooden barrel, and they had those steel rings around them too. And the barrels that broke, we'd save the rings because we'd put a gunny sack over the top of the barrel, and then put the ring over the top of the gunny sack in order to move it because they were full of mash and you know, that wasn't refined yet, ready to cook. So that's the way they moved them. Took 2 men to pick them up, put them in the truck. That was a job. Work at it all night.
And then to make deliveries, his dad always had Fords, and he always liked to drive fast, and his top speed was
85. We had Chevrolets. It wouldn't go over 85 miles an hour. Dad never carried a gun.
what he carried to keep. He always said he carried a bag of nails, and if somebody came up behind him that he didn't know, he'd throw the nails out, and that pretty much stopped the pursuit if it was.
The kids, did the kids go along a lot?
Always.
Always. Okay.
Always one of the kids
I
went.
was a kid hanging in the back seat like this because there was no seats in the back. They had to hang on the front seat. I was hanging on the front seat.
And being that the moonshine was put in these crocks and the roads were rough,
Yeah, we break some of them, and Dad said, is there anything broke back there? Yeah, it says running in my loafers.
so he said the nuns always knew which kids belonged to the bootleggers, so they could smell their shoes.
Yeah, you couldn't get that smell out of the shoes. I don't know if anybody has, I imagine everybody has tasted tequila somewhere along the line. Well, that's moonshine. It smells just like moonshine, and it's just maybe a high grade of moonshine.
Earlier he said that he never made moon on that farm, but he had a couple other farms, and one was the Germain farm over towards New Richmond, but it was kind of an elaborate setup with a lot of deception there.
Oh yeah, that was there was an upstairs facing Medicounts' farm.
And when you walk in, it was all horses. But then there was a false wall, and behind there with a big area with the still and barrels surrounding it. And the mash, when you wanted to get rid of it,
Yeah, we used to pump the mash in the manure pile and then go out and cover it. But the hogs found it and some of the cattle would find it. And they'd walk around there kind of dizzy.
They were happy.
The people in charge, I think Meddy Constant you mentioned, and John Klocher, and Tom Constant.
Johnny Klucher, Tommy Constance, and Isaac Constance served a year and a day. They got caught there at that Germain farm.
They went to Leavenworth Prison.
A year and a day, yeah. And Isaac always said, boy, when you hear that door go clang, he says, that makes you think.
But his dad always paid him. Was it $100 a week?
$20 a week while they were in jail.
And then when they got out, they came to collect right away.
It was a risk that we're taking, you know, and that's why we had to pay them that kind of money. My dad did, in order to get somebody to work, to do that kind of work.
Yeah, and his dad farmed to cover up his gasoline use for the gas tax that they used to make this
Gas
still.
burners, big gas burners underneath the still. There was 4 gas burners under each big still. I remember that. And we used gasoline. Well, gasoline was cheap then, 10 cents a gallon, 12 cents, you know. But there was about a 3-cent state tax. Dad would apply for state tax. He burned all that gas on the farm. Then he had to buy a tractor to prove it.
An interesting process, you know, just Anna Blue had said how they got raided and they took all her raw moon, which was just made, which was only worth $5 a gallon, but in the back room they had a bigger barrel was worth $5 because it was aging process, but Lowell's dad had a process of aging it in 30 days to the equivalent to 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, we just lay the barrels on the side, and you could roll them a little bit. And we put oak chips in there, and then we had a heater that went into that bunghole that was on the top of the barrel, you know. Well, when you laid it on the side, there was a hole in the side of the barrel. And there was a heater that could fit right down inside. And you had to heat it, and for so many days, and we could make 5 or 10-year-old whiskey that way. And we used to bottle it. Make White Horse whiskey, Canadian whiskey, 4 Roses. We had it in cases, and we'd get the stamps from the syndicate in St. Paul, Minneapolis. I remember putting them on, the state and the federal stamp on all of those bottles. Seal the top of the bottle with a plastic seal. We'd put it in hot water, it would expand, and then just lay it over the top of the bottle, and it would shrink right tight to the bottle. And we did it.
Then it was legal and they sold it. All the stamps are on it. His original farm was where Steve Martell's property is, back where Keisler's used to live. His dad came in and built a 12 by 20 house.
12 and 20, yeah, and I had 5 kids in there.
And then when it got too small, that's when they moved up to the Thalen farm and purchased that for, what, $3,200?
$200. I went down to Federal Land Bank and paid for it with 4 gallons of coarse syrup bales of silver. All back in the moonshine days, they used a lot of silver because the banks closed in 32. And well, the banks closed before 32, most of them. And the people didn't like paper money. They used a lot of silver.
You know, with all that money, who was in charge of all that money?
My grandmother was in charge of the money.
Oh, you gotta tell them about when they took the eggs in, and Grandma was around.
I gotta tell them about Grandma. Grandma always took the sugar sacks. We used to get a lot of sugar in cloth bags, you know, and white bags. And there was writing on them, so they bleach them, and they made everything out of cloth bags, curtains, underwear, and aprons. And always had 2 big pockets in the aprons. She had a rosary in one. With a 32 revolver in the other one. I still got the gun.
She must have had some rough customers. You said they were a pair of brothers often came to...
Oh, yeah, like the Warner brothers, the Warner truck lines, they had a square block in Minneapolis. They owned a square block in Minneapolis. They used to buy a lot of booze from my dad. It was recommended by the syndicate. That was Al Tankinoff was the head of the syndicate.
So when they'd come on, they always carried a gun with them, and
Always with a gun.
one of them would have a gun, one would talk like crazy, and the other one
Always well dressed.
sat with his back to the wall so he could watch everything and had a big gun. And always very well dressed, big hats.
And the Wolsteins were the same way. Max Wolstein. They'd talk an arm off you, and his brother would sit there with his hat right down over his eyes like this, and he'd sit in the corner, always sat in the corner. The other one, the one that did all the sitting and was quiet, would never say anything, but always had a gun. And the one that talked so much, he was always wandering around and following my mother around all the time and shooting the bull. And he'd tell my mother, "You was a doll." He was a Russian Jew in Russia when he was 8 years old. He still comes, he came up to our house yet after my dad passed away in the 50s. He'd come up to visit us. But he served time in Leavenworth. He served a year and a day, and when the day he got out, his wife went in. While she was in Leavenworth, their son went in. They were all buying a moon from us, all buying moonshine from us.
What would, when they came in to the house, what would happen with the car?
Oh, my dad, Dad never kept any moonshine on the farm. We always started, Louis Klucher, out here south of town, Henry Klucher. We had stored there.
Uncle Henry?
Yep. And Gus Brown had some, Henry Birch had some, Milton Mikey had some. We had some stored all over the neighborhood, you know. And we'd take the car, we'd leave the people there, we'd take the car. My dad would take the car and go and fill it up, put the moonshine in it, and then come back with the car. And these fellows would sit around there and try to entertain themselves with, you know, shooting the bull and us kids. And we had one fellow from Lake Elmo. His name was Sheik, I remember that. He had an egg farm in Lake Elmo, and he smoked marijuana all the time. And we had the filter of the cigarette was marijuana. I don't know how he could, but I can smell that. I can smell it yet today.
How about the feds? The feds never bothered you?
So what?
Feds never bother you?
Oh, yeah. In fact, they knew Dad by first, second, and last name, and I always told him that we're going to get you someday.
Did Al Capone ever come to Somerset?
They tried. Then they didn't have radios like they have now. Where you wouldn't have a flying chance.
No.
But then in those days, they try to catch you with a car, you know, try to run you off the road or something. And Dad would always throw him a handful of nails.
Oh, the nails handy, huh?
With the big-headed roofing nails. Buy it from Florence Hardware down here.
Who was one of your more famous people?
Who? Huh? Oh, yeah. I was with my dad when he delivered moonshine to Ma Barker in southeast White Bear Lake. Yeah, she liked kids. She always had candy. She wouldn't give you a piece or two, you know. She'd come with a whole bag full. Here, bring this home for your brothers and sisters. Always a big handful. A big bag. Always a bunch of guys around, and she was there. She was always alone. But there was always a whole bunch of guys around there.
At that time, things were tough. There was no money, no jobs.
You couldn't buy a job. There was no money around. You couldn't buy a job. Practically everybody was bootlegging. I had Dave Bro and Ben Bro all bought moonshine from my dad. And they'd resell it, you know, or use it in the bar.
Yeah.
Well, before the 30s, before 32, see, when Franklin Roosevelt opened up Prohibition. Before that, you couldn't serve liquor in a bar. So they'd have beer and then they'd spike it with moonshine. And they were still selling it, but they'd spike it with the moonshine. They'd take a couple of good slugs out of the beer bottle and then finish filling it up with alcohol. In 32, they opened up Prohibition, and then price of moonshine went down.
And that was kind of the end of it. And that was a time when people lost their farms, and you mentioned Ben Boardman.
Yeah, poor Ben built that great big barn, and he had borrowed $8,500 to build that barn from the federal land bank. It was a lot of money in those days. And his wife went back and bought the farm back for $3,200. And the same with Isaiah Roy. Isaiah and Henry Roy's dad financed the farm and lost it to the federal land bank, and their wives went back and bought it back from for them. And a lot of farms were saved that way. It was tough.
Any questions from people here?
Yeah, I just like, well, did you bottle the moonshine or you shipped it in barrels or what?
We had it in barrels. We had to put oak chips, burnt oak chips in the barrel. And every day you have to go up there and stir it, roll it a little. And then have the heater in there. And they'd age it. And then Dad would siphon out a little. And
Did you put in bottles then?
Or Crocs?
no, it had to be a certain color for age. And when it got to that color, then we'd bottle it.
So
Then we put all the stamps on it and put it in cases and seal the case. And,
Then you had to buy all these bottles, wouldn't you?
oh yeah, we had access to all of that through the syndicate.
Oh, I see.
he said his dad could hold it up to the light and tell exactly how far along and how old it looked like. Other question, Roberta?
I was wondering if you had any dealings with Al Capone, or if he was ever in this area.
Never that we knew of. Never that my dad ever knew of.
Although, talking to Anna Blow, she mentioned Al Capone and Big Mary had come to town.
They were at the terrace at one time.
Yeah,
They said they were, yeah.
yeah.
You remember where Joe Doble used to live? Yeah. On Depot Road? Where we're,
Chris?
no, south of that, on the left side of the road. It used to be the only house on that road at the time. Joe lived there for years. Garrity? Garrity, you know where they live?
Yeah, and White.
Upstairs in that house is where my dad used to have Age Moon in that house.
The old Garrity place?
The attic. The attic always was warm. There was no insulation, between the floor and the ceiling. Upstairs was always warm, up in the attics. That's where he put the moonshine. I mean, the barrels, put them in barrels up there.
Well,
Amy?
I know my side of the family, the parent family did some moonshine also, and were caught actually. A couple of people were caught. Did your family ever work with the parent family at all?
Did they ever work with the parent family?
That's my own parents. What are you talking about?
What's your dad's name?
It's Kenny's daughter.
Amy, what's your grandpa's name?
Well, Myron, but
His dad.
Ed.
Had parent.
Well, we used to make it, Ed used to drink it.
When they had raids on these farms, did someone turn them in, or did the feds watch them long enough to figure out where it was coming from, or? Because the farm where we lived, way down in the woods, was when I was a kid, went down there, didn't know what it was, because we had moved here. And, all these big barrels and everything with the nice stave barrels, everything was shot full of holes.
Oh, yeah.
How
The
did
federal
you find
agents
out
would
that was
come
coming in
in.
there?
The federal agents would come in fact, on Germain Farm, right,
Edmund Germain's farm.
how do you explain that? What's the name of that road?
What's the name of the road by your old freeze?
Where your dad and mother lived.
Yeah, I don't know, I don't even
You
remember.
don't know the number of the name?
It would, I don't know, I don't remember that.
Anyway, by
anymore.
Perry's Junkyard, you go down to the end of that road, there's a T,
T, you
170th.
go-
170th, take a left. The first farm on the right, that barn up there, that was the last barn my dad got dumped. They call it, when they dumped it, the federal agents got in there and busted everything up with an axe. Break everything up.
What Marianne asked was, did they get turned in by some people? Did some people
Oh,
turn
yeah,
them
there
in?
was always somebody gonna try to turn you in. It was a tough business. People were,
Well, I was
working
gonna
day and
question,
night.
I was gonna question you about that, because in my neighborhood, it wasn't unusual to see a steel get smashed.
Yeah.
Real bad, and it happened pretty often.
They go in there and with.
Evidently, they didn't have your protection.
I think he did mention they did have protection at times, didn't you?
Yeah, the syndicate would, Dad would call into Minneapolis and find out what highway to use to go into the cities. And you had to go in through St. Croix Falls or Hudson or Red Wing or Hastings.
Any place but Stillwater.
Well, Stillwater too, you know, it depends where the federal agents were sitting.
Okay.
And they knew.
Yeah.
They seemed to have the inside story. Al Tankinoff was good at that.
Yeah.
In fact, I gotta tell you something else about Al Tankinoff.
Where did you get the stills? So many were being busted up. Somebody must have been producing them.
Theodore Belil made most of them. Theodore was good at it, very good. Anna Belil's husband. Excellent. He made 3-4 stills for my dad.
Out of copper or
Oh,
what?
yeah.
Yeah.
All copper and solder.
What about Al Taganoff?
Al Tankinoff was the head of the syndicate, and then during the war in the 40s, I don't know if you remember, that beer was hard to get in this town. It was limited, and very few people could get just a little, small amount. So my dad, called Al Tankinoff. He says, "Can we get some beer?" "Yeah," he says, "go to Bloomer. I own that brewery in Bloomer. Get you all the beer you want." And he did. Come in here.
Didn't know that.
Another night job. Well, then I was in high school. By then, I could help Dad a lot. And we'd go to Bloomer with that old truck we had, an old 41 Ford, and we put 400 or 500 cases in there and come home. The first couple of trips we made, we blew out all the tires. So it was a mess. And then we'd park it at home, and at night we'd come over and deliver it to Archie's and Ben's and Jack Raleigh and the Terrace, Earl's Bar, and Bova's. So everybody had beer. And they used to take and soak the beer bottles in the water, take the Pabst Blue Ribbon stamp off of it and put it on Buckingham Ale. That's what the beer was, Buckingham Ale. And they'd soak the bottles in water and take the stamps out, put the Pabst stamp on, or Miller, whatever it was, you know, was selling good. That was the bartender's job.
That's a lot of work.
Question.
I missed a little bit of this, so I hope it hasn't been asked, or I hope it has. Are there tunnels? Did you talk about tunnels?
Are there any tunnels between some of these old bars, something that you know of?
No, nothing that I know of.
I've heard that rumor before too, but nobody ever knows for sure.
Isn't that when they were gambling more than anything?
Well, there was a tunnel between Palms and the house next to the house up there.
The what?
Because my brother was bartending at Palms, and they used to have the slot machines down in that house next to the Palms.
I think Marvin Shea mentioned that too when he was here.
They had a way of going in down that basement.
Yeah, I think there was. No, I believe there was there.
Well, thank you, everybody, and thank Lowell and Loris for being with us today. Did good.